Welcome, weary traveler, to a quiet journey back in time. Tonight, we'll gently explore the often overlooked, yet deeply peaceful, world of medieval peasants. This isn't a tale of grand battles or dramatic kings, but rather a soft exploration of the everyday rhythms, the quiet joys, and the simple realities that shaped their lives in medieval Europe. Imagine a world centuries ago, long before the hurried pace of our modern days. A world where time moved with the sun, the seasons, and the gentle needs of the earth. We'll drift through humble villages and across gentle fields, observing the subtle ways they lived, worked, and found contentment in their quiet routines. You don't need to remember every detail. Just let the quiet rhythm of this story wash over you, a soothing whisper from the past, inviting you to simply listen and to slowly drift into a peaceful slumber. Perhaps you'll find comfort in the gentle cadence of history, as we explore how even the most ordinary lives held their own quiet beauty. There's a stillness to their story, a quiet resilience that speaks across the centuries. We'll delve into the fabric of their daily existence, from the soil they tilled to the homes they built, from their quiet faith to their simple celebrations. So, let your mind unwind, your breath deepen, and allow yourself to sink into the quiet comfort of your bed. We'll begin by setting the scene, understanding the quiet world these peasants inhabited, a world where life was intimately connected to the gentle earth beneath their feet. Just relax and let the story unfold. Let's first imagine a quiet landscape in medieval Europe, vast stretches of fields under a gentle sky. Here, the very pulse of life was tied to the rhythm of the earth, a deep and unhurried connection that defined the days of the medieval peasant. Imagine the soft earth yielding to the plow, the quiet growth of crops under the sun. Their world was a world of the land, an intimate dance with nature's quiet cycles. From the tender shoots of spring to the golden bounty of autumn, every aspect of their existence was shaped by the soil beneath their bare or simply shod feet. There was a quiet understanding, a deep, ingrained knowledge passed down through generations about when to plant, when to harvest, and when to let the fields rest under a blanket of winter snow. You don't need to strain to recall the specifics of crop rotation or the names of ancient grains. Simply picture the endless fields, the quiet promise held within each tiny seed. Consider the early mornings, not jolted by alarms, but by the soft light filtering through a tiny window or the quiet stirrings of chickens outside. The air would carry the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. There was a peaceful consistency to these mornings. Before the sun had fully climbed, a peasant might already be walking towards the fields, the ground soft and cool underfoot. His tools were simple, often made of wood and iron, crafted for steady, repetitive motions, not for speed. The sound of a plow, drawn by a patient ox or horse, was a slow, rhythmic tearing of the earth, a deeply satisfying sound in the quiet morning air. The fields themselves were a patchwork of various crops, perhaps strips of wheat or rye, swaying gently in the breeze, promising the bread that was the staff of life. Nearby, plots of barley for brewing or oats for the animals lay in quiet readiness. There were also smaller gardens, close to the humble homes, where vegetables like cabbage, onions, and peas grew, offering their quiet, steady contribution to the family's meals. Each plant had its season, its time to flourish, and the peasants understood this silent language of growth. You may already be drifting off as you picture these scenes, the steady pace of manual labor, the quiet communication between farmer and beast, the feeling of soil crumbling between the fingers. This was not a hurried effort, but a patient cultivation, a partnership with the land that sustained them. There were no deadlines in the modern sense, only the timeless demands of the sun and rain. A peasant learned to read the sky, to feel the coming changes in the wind, much like a sailor understands the sea. This connection was vital, a quiet source of wisdom and survival. The year flowed like a slow river, each season bringing its own set of quiet tasks. In the crisp chill of early spring, after the last vestiges of winter had melted away, came the vital work of plowing and sowing. The earth, awakened from its slumber, was turned over, ready to receive the precious seeds. This was a time of hopeful anticipation, a quiet prayer whispered with each handful of grain cast upon the furrows. Then came the gentle tending of the fields through the long days of summer. Weeding, protecting the young plants from hungry birds or pests. Mending fences, these were quiet, persistent tasks. The sun would warm their backs, and the drone of insects would fill the air, a natural, soothing hum. There was a simple beauty in watching the crops grow taller, greener, day by quiet day, under the benevolent gaze of the sun. Late summer and early autumn brought the most intense, yet profoundly satisfying, period, the harvest. Imagine the entire village, young and old, working together in the fields, the air filled with the quiet rustle of stalks being cut, the soft thud of bundles being gathered. It was a time of collective effort, of shared purpose, and a quiet sense of achievement as the fruits of their year-long labor were brought in. The barns would slowly fill, offering a quiet assurance against the coming cold. You don't need to remember the precise tools they used. Just envision the rhythmic movements, the shared smiles, the communal spirit that permeated this vital time. As the cooler days of late autumn and winter arrived, the fields rested. This was a time for different tasks, repairing tools, mending clothes, perhaps some quiet spinning or weaving indoors. The pace slowed even further, and the long, dark evenings were spent by the warm glow of a small fire, where stories were quietly told and plans for the next season gently laid. The sounds outside would be muted, perhaps the soft falling of snow or the quiet whisper of wind through barren trees. This restful period was essential, allowing both the land and the people to rejuvenate before the cycle began anew. The peasant's life was a testament to patience. They understood that growth couldn't be rushed, that bounties came in their own time. This quiet understanding of natural rhythms permeated their very being, shaping their perspectives and their peaceful approach to daily challenges. They lived in intimate communion with the earth, their lives a gentle echo of its seasons, a timeless dance of planting, growing, and harvesting. As the land offered its quiet bounty, the peasant's home provided a gentle shelter. Let's softly shift our focus now to the humble dwellings where these quiet lives unfolded. Imagine now a small, humble dwelling nestled among other similar homes in a quiet village. This was more than just a shelter. It was the heart of the peasant family's world in medieval Europe, a place of gentle warmth and quiet gathering. These homes were simple, built from the resources most readily available. Sturdy timber frames, walls of wattle and daub, a mixture of woven branches coated with clay, mud, and straw, and roofs gently thatched with straw or reeds. They blended seamlessly into the peaceful landscape, part of the earth from which they rose. You don't need to visualize every beam or every wisp of straw. Simply feel the sense of shelter, of a haven from the outside world. The windows, if present, were small openings, perhaps covered with oiled animal skin or wooden shutters, allowing only a muted, soft light to filter in. This kept the interior cool in summer and helped to retain warmth in the colder months. The air inside would often carry the subtle scent of wood smoke, mingling with the earthy aroma of stored grains and dried herbs. It was a comforting, natural perfume, speaking of quiet domesticity. Stepping inside, you would find a single, communal space. There were no separate rooms for sleeping or eating, no grand divisions. Everyone shared the same quiet warmth. In the very center, or perhaps slightly to one side, a simple hearth was the undisputed heart of the home. Here, a small fire would perpetually smolder, offering not just warmth for chilly evenings, but also the gentle heat for cooking. The flickering light from the flames would dance softly on the walls, casting peaceful shadows, a natural lullaby for the eyes. You may already be drifting off as you picture this gentle glow, a timeless symbol of home and security. Around this central hearth, the family would gather. Perhaps simple wooden benches or low stools offered a place to rest weary limbs. A large, sturdy table, also likely made of wood, might be used for preparing food, for quiet conversations, or for mending tools after a long day in the fields. Sleeping arrangements were equally simple, perhaps straw mattresses laid out on the floor, or low wooden platforms. The entire family would sleep together, finding comfort in their closeness, the soft sounds of quiet breathing filling the little space. Storage was minimal, carefully utilized. Perhaps a few rough-hewn shelves held simple wooden bowls, clay pots, and a handful of basic utensils. Dried herbs might hang from the rafters, rustling softly in any stray draft. Baskets woven from local reeds or willow branches would hold grains, roots, or other small necessities. Everything had its place, a quiet order born of practicality and simplicity. There was no clutter, no excess, just what was needed for a peaceful, functional life. Even the floor, often made of packed earth, contributed to the rustic charm. It was swept regularly, kept as clean as possible, bearing the gentle marks of bare feet or soft leather shoes. The sounds within these homes were gentle. The soft crackle of the fire, the quiet murmur of voices, the rhythmic thump of a mortar and pestle preparing grain, or the gentle swish of a broom. There were no loud noises, no jarring sounds to disturb the tranquility. Consider the rhythm of the evening in such a dwelling. After the long day's work, the family would return, their bodies tired but their spirits quiet. The hearth fire, perhaps rekindled, would cast its comforting glow. A simple meal would be prepared and shared, not with bustling fanfare, but with quiet appreciation. Stories might be exchanged in soft tones, the events of the day recounted, or ancient tales whispered. The children, perhaps drowsy from their own simple play, would quietly drift to sleep, tucked in near the warmth of the fire. This humble home, though lacking what we consider modern comforts, provided profound security and peace for the medieval peasant in medieval Europe. It was a sanctuary, a place where the family unit, the core of their existence, could rest, replenish, and connect. It was a place where life unfolded with a quiet dignity, intimately tied to the earth and the cycle of seasons, but also to the warmth of human connection. You may already be feeling that quiet sense of warmth and security, a deep peace settling over you. Within these humble homes, families quietly came together, and each day brought its own gentle routines. Let's drift now into the quiet patterns of their daily lives from dawn till dusk. As the first soft light of dawn touched the thatched roofs of the village in medieval Europe, a new day began, not with haste, but with a gentle awakening. Imagine the quiet stirring within each home, as the routines of the day softly unfurled. There was no jarring alarm clock, no sudden rush. Instead, the world gradually brightened, and the peasant family would slowly rouse themselves from their straw mattresses or sleeping platforms, guided by the subtle shift from darkness to the muted grays of early morning. The very first task, often performed by the eldest child or a parent, was to gently rekindle the hearth fire, which had been banked overnight to preserve the embers. The soft crackle of kindling catching, the faint scent of wood smoke filling the air, created a peaceful ambience. This was the heart of the home's early morning warmth, where hands could be warmed against the lingering chill and simple preparations for the day could begin. You don't need to remember the precise order of tasks. Just let the quiet, steady rhythm of their awakening guide your thoughts. Outside, the sounds of the village would slowly begin to stir. Perhaps a distant rooster offered a sleepy crow, or the soft lowing of a cow could be heard from the small byre attached to the dwelling. A peasant might gently check on their few animals, the precious cow, a handful of chickens, or perhaps a pig, ensuring they were well, and perhaps fetching a bucket of fresh, cool water from the village well. This was a quiet journey, often just a short walk, the only sounds being the soft crunch of earth underfoot or the distant calls of early birds. Breakfast was a simple affair, taken swiftly and quietly before the serious work of the day began. Perhaps a hunk of coarse bread, left over from the previous day, dipped into a bowl of watery pottage or eaten with a piece of cheese. There was little conversation, just a shared focus on sustenance, a quiet understanding of the efforts that lay ahead. This meal, though humble, provided the gentle energy needed for the long hours of labor under the sky. As the sun began to climb higher, painting the eastern sky with soft, muted colors, the peasant would gather their tools. For the man, this might be a simple wooden plow, a hoe, or a scythe. For the woman, perhaps a basket for gathering, or a spindle for spinning as she walked. There was a quiet purposefulness to these preparations. Leaving the humble dwelling, they would step out into the crisp morning air, perhaps joining a few neighbors also heading towards the communal fields. The journey to the fields was often a silent, contemplative walk, a chance to observe the dew on the grass, the soft light on the distant trees, and the quiet beauty of their natural world. Once in the fields, the work began in earnest, but always at a measured, unhurried pace. Imagine the rhythmic thump of a hoe breaking up clods of earth, or the steady swish of a scythe through tall grass. If it was plowing season, the slow, powerful pull of an ox or a draft horse, accompanied by the farmer's quiet encouragement, would be the dominant sound. The plowshare would gently cut through the soil, turning over the rich, dark earth, releasing its ancient, earthy scent. There was a deep satisfaction in watching the neat furrows stretch behind them, a visible testament to their quiet labor. You don't need to feel the strain. Simply let the image of continuous, steady effort soothe your mind. You may already be drifting off as you picture these scenes, the repeated motions, the feeling of the sun gradually warming the back, the distant buzz of insects, the subtle sounds of nature accompanying their toil. This was not work driven by urgency or stress, but by the timeless demands of the seasons and the quiet imperative to provide for one's family. A peasant learned to find a meditative quality in these tasks, a deep connection to the land and the simple act of creation. Mid-morning might bring a brief pause, a moment to stretch weary limbs, to share a quiet word with a neighbor, or simply to gaze across the vast expanse of fields. Perhaps a small drink of water from a leather flask, cool and refreshing. There was no formal break, no loud interruption, just a quiet moment to recalibrate before continuing the steady work. The sun would be higher now, casting fewer shadows, and the air might be growing warmer. Lunch, if it could be called that, was usually a simple affair, eaten right there in the fields. More bread, perhaps some dried meat or cheese if they were fortunate, or just a few foraged greens. It was a quick, quiet meal, taken without ceremony. This was a pause for sustenance, not for lingering. The sounds of the fields would continue, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird of prey, a constant, soothing backdrop to their quiet repast. You don't need to remember what they ate, just the peaceful simplicity of a meal under the open sky. The afternoon would stretch long and warm, a continuation of the morning's efforts. Weeding might be the task, a gentle, repetitive pulling of unwanted plants, ensuring the precious crops had room to grow. Or perhaps spreading manure, enriching the soil with quiet care. Women and children also had their roles, gathering firewood from the nearby woods, carefully avoiding thorns and brambles, collecting wild berries or nuts when in season, fetching water from the well, the rhythmic clink of the bucket against the stone lip echoing softly. Each task, though seemingly small, was a vital thread in the fabric of their daily survival, performed with a quiet diligence. As the afternoon wore on, and the sun began its slow descent towards the western horizon, painting the sky with softer, warmer hues, the work in the fields would gradually wind down. There was a quiet sense of accomplishment, not boasted but simply felt. The tools would be cleaned, perhaps stored in a small shed or carried back to the home. The walk back to the village was slower, perhaps more contemplative, the body tired but the mind quieted by the day's physical effort. The sounds of the village would become more distinct as they approached. The distant bleating of sheep, the gentle lowing of cows, the soft clatter of a pot, or the quiet voices of children playing in the lane. The scent of wood smoke, thicker now, would drift invitingly from the various hearths. This was the promise of home, of warmth, and of the evening's quiet domesticity. Upon returning to their humble dwelling, the focus shifted to evening chores. The women would prepare the evening meal, often a hearty pottage or stew, simmering slowly over the rekindled hearth fire. The gentle bubbling and the fragrant steam would fill the small space. Children might help with simple tasks, bringing in water, tending to a small garden plot near the house, or fetching kindling. The men might mend tools, sharpen a scythe, or quietly repair a piece of furniture. There was a quiet hum of activity, each person contributing to the smooth running of the household. Evenings were a time for quiet connection. After the simple supper, eaten again around the glowing hearth, conversation would be soft, often about the day's events, the weather, or perhaps old stories passed down through generations. There were no bright, artificial lights to jar the senses, only the flickering, dancing light of the fire, and perhaps a single tallow candle, casting long, peaceful shadows. You don't need to strain to hear their words. Just imagine the comforting cadence of their voices, a quiet testament to shared lives. As dusk deepened into night, and the stars began to quietly emerge in the vast, inky sky, the sounds outside would soften even further. The village would become still, save for the occasional hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the trees, or the distant barking of a dog. The peasant family would prepare for sleep, their bodies tired, but their minds peaceful. They might offer a quiet prayer, or simply lay down, feeling the comfort of their humble space. This was the quiet end of a quiet day in medieval Europe, a cycle of gentle effort, simple sustenance, and profound connection to the earth and to each other. It was a life lived in harmony with nature, a testament to resilience and the enduring power of ordinary routines. You may already be feeling that quiet rhythm, a deep sense of calm settling over you, much like the night settled over their peaceful village. With the day's quiet work gently concluded, thoughts would often turn to sustenance and simple pleasures. Let's softly explore now the quiet customs around food and drink that nourish these lives. Imagine the quiet warmth of a hearth fire, a simple pot gently simmering over the flames. Food for the medieval peasants in medieval Europe was not elaborate, but it was honest and nourishing, a quiet cornerstone of their daily existence. Their meals were deeply connected to the land we spoke of earlier, a direct bounty from their quiet labor, prepared and consumed with a deep, unhurried appreciation for its simple goodness. The undisputed king of the peasant diet was bread, not the light, airy loaves we might know today, but a dense, hearty, often dark bread, baked from rye, barley, or oats. It was the very foundation of almost every meal, a source of steady energy for their demanding physical lives. Imagine the quiet effort of grinding the grain, perhaps by hand with a simple corn stone, the rhythmic swish and crunch as the kernels slowly transformed into flour. Then, the gentle mixing of the flour with water, perhaps a little sourdough starter if they were fortunate, and a touch of salt. The kneading would be a slow, meditative process, the dough gradually becoming smooth and elastic under patient hands. Baking often took place in communal ovens, perhaps shared by several families or even the entire village. Picture the quiet gathering at the oven house, the gentle murmur of voices, the comforting warmth emanating from the heated stones. The heavy, round loaves, marked with a simple cross or a family sign, will be carefully placed inside the dark, hot chamber. Then, the quiet wait, punctuated only by the distant sounds of village life, until the glorious scent of freshly baked bread began to drift through the air. You don't need to recall the exact baking times. Simply let the image of that warm, fragrant loaf, pulled golden brown from the oven, settle into your mind. This bread was more than just food. It was security, a quiet promise that hunger would be kept at bay. You may already be drifting off as you imagine its wholesome aroma. Accompanying the bread, and often the most common dish, was pottage. This was a thick, nourishing stew, simmering almost continuously over the hearth fire. Its ingredients were simple and versatile, changing with the seasons and what was available. Imagine the gentle preparation, hearty grains like oats, barley, or peas forming the base. To this, whatever vegetables were at hand would be added. Humble cabbage, sweet onions, earthy leeks, crisp carrots, though these were often wild and less vibrant than today's, and perhaps some wild herbs gathered from the nearby woods or fields. Meat was a rare luxury. For the peasant, a piece of meat might come from a scrawny chicken, a rabbit snared quietly in the woods, or perhaps a bit of salted pork if their lord allowed them to keep a pig. Fish, for those near rivers or coasts, might offer a more regular protein source, caught with simple nets or lines, a quiet pursuit by the water's edge. But for most, pottage was largely vegetarian, a gentle blend of plants and grains, providing warmth and sustenance without fanfare. The slow, patient simmering of the pottage over the fire meant it was often ready to eat throughout the day, a constant source of quiet comfort and nourishment. Beyond the fields and gardens, the peasant family also relied on their few animals for a gentle stream of sustenance. A cow would provide milk, which could be drunk fresh or, more commonly, churned into butter or carefully transformed into cheese. The process of cheese-making was a quiet art, involving patient waiting as the curds separated and then slowly pressed. Hens, scratching quietly in the farmyard, would offer their daily eggs, a valuable source of protein. These were not products of vast industrial farms, but of a quiet, symbiotic relationship between the peasant and their humble livestock, providing a steady, gentle flow of food. From their small garden plots and the wild fringes of the manor came the fresh, vibrant additions to their diet. Cabbage, sturdy and reliable, were a staple. Onions and garlic added flavor and were believed to have medicinal properties. Peas and beans, rich in nutrients, grew quietly in their patches. In summer, the forests and hedgerows offered a gentle bounty. Wild berries like blackberries and raspberries, nuts like hazelnuts and chestnuts, and a variety of edible greens. Gathering these required patience and a quiet knowledge of the local flora, a gentle foraging that connected them even more deeply to their environment. You don't need to vividly recall each plant. Just picture the quiet act of gathering nature's simple gifts. For drinks, water was, of course, essential, often drawn from a communal well or a clear stream. But more commonly, and certainly safer for drinking, was ale or cider. This was a light, often weak brew, made from barley or apples, and consumed throughout the day, even by children. It provided hydration and a few extra calories, and because of the brewing process, it was safer than untreated water. Imagine the gentle bubbling of the fermenting brew in a large wooden vat, the quiet transformation of grain into a sustaining drink. There was no sense of revelry or excess, just the quiet, consistent production of a necessary beverage, a gentle hum of quiet fermentation in the background. The meals themselves were unhurried, yet simple. There were moments for quiet gathering around the hearth or the sturdy wooden table. There were no elaborate courses, no intricate silverware, just wooden bowls, perhaps a common knife, and hands used for tearing bread or scooping up pottage. The focus was on the food itself, on its warmth and nourishment, shared in quiet companionship. The sounds would be soft, the gentle clatter of a wooden spoon, the quiet chewing, perhaps a few murmured words of appreciation. You may already be drifting off as you picture this peaceful scene of simple sustenance. The cycle of the seasons heavily influenced their diet. In the bountiful months of summer and early autumn, there was an abundance of fresh vegetables, fruits, and grains. This was a time for quiet enjoyment of the immediate harvest. But as winter approached, the focus shifted to food preservation. This was done through simple, gentle methods, drying grains and herbs, salting what little meat or fish they had, or storing root vegetables like carrots and parsnips in cool, dark pits or cellars. These quiet acts of preparation ensured that the lean months of winter would still offer some form of sustenance, providing a quiet reassurance against the cold. The peasant diet, though seemingly restrictive to our modern eyes, was incredibly resilient and deeply rooted in the rhythms of the earth. It was a diet of quiet dignity, providing exactly what was needed for a life of honest labor. There was a profound absence of waste, a deep respect for every crumb and every drop, born from a lifetime of careful resourcefulness. This was a life where food was truly life, prepared with quiet care and consumed with gentle gratitude. With the day's quiet work gently concluded, thoughts would often turn to sustenance and simple pleasures. Let's softly explore now the quiet customs around food and drink that nourished these lives. Oh, wait, we just did that. My apologies, traveler. As you may already be drifting off, I hope you enjoyed that quiet exploration of their simple meals. From these quiet customs of food, we shall now gently shift our focus to something equally vital, the gentle bonds that held these small worlds together, the quiet hum of community life. Let's drift now to the village whispers and the connections that sustain them beyond the individual household. Imagine the quiet murmur of voices in a village square, the soft sounds of children playing, and the gentle creak of a cart passing by. Life in medieval Europe, for a peasant, was deeply intertwined with their community, a tapestry woven with quiet acts of kindness and shared experiences. Beyond the walls of their humble homes, the village itself was a larger, extended family, a network of quiet support and understanding. In this quiet world, cooperation was not merely a good idea. It was a gentle necessity for survival. Much of the land was farmed communally, especially the large, open fields that stretched beyond the individual peasant's small garden plot. Imagine the vast fields, divided into long, narrow strips, each tended by a different family. But when it came to major tasks, like plowing the heavy earth in spring or gathering the entire harvest in autumn, the villagers worked side by side. The rhythmic swish of many scythes, the steady, synchronized effort of several families working together to bring in the grain. These were quiet, powerful demonstrations of their shared purpose. There was a peaceful understanding of each other's pace, a quiet rhythm to their collective toil that fostered a deep sense of belonging. You don't need to remember who owned which strip. Simply picture the many hands working in gentle harmony, a quiet dance with the seasons. You may already be drifting off as you visualize this shared effort. Beyond the fields, many other tasks required the quiet strength of the community. When a new house needed building, or an existing one required repairs, neighbors would offer their time and skills without question. Imagine the soft thud of timbers being carefully placed, the gentle squelch of mud being daubed onto wattle frames. It was a communal effort, marked by quiet conversation, simple instruction, and the shared satisfaction of a job done together. Perhaps the women would quietly prepare a communal meal to sustain the workers, the aroma of simple fare drifting gently through the air. This spirit of mutual aid ensured that even the most arduous tasks were lightened by shared burdens and quiet companionship. Life, even in its quiet simplicity, often presented unexpected challenges. Illness could strike, a harvest could fail, or a family might face a sudden loss. In such times, the village community would rally around its members with quiet, unwavering support. Imagine a neighbor quietly bringing a small bowl of nourishing pottage to a sick household or offering to tend the fields of a family in need. There was no need for loud declarations of charity. It was an unspoken understanding, a gentle current of compassion that flowed through the village. You may already be feeling that quiet sense of security, knowing that in this world, no one faced hardship entirely alone. The care of children was also a communal understanding. While parents worked, older children would often quietly look after younger siblings, or neighbors might keep a gentle eye on the little ones playing in the village street. The sounds of children's games, soft and spontaneous, would be a constant, reassuring backdrop to the adult world of quiet labor. There was a shared responsibility for the well-being of the next generation, a quiet investment in the future of their small, interconnected world. Even the village elders played a gentle, yet crucial, role. These were the men and women who carried the living memory of the community, the quiet wisdom accumulated over many seasons. They might sit by the fire in their homes, or on a simple bench outside, observing the gentle flow of village life. Young couples might quietly seek their advice on planting or on matters of the heart. Disputes, when they arose, were often settled not through loud arguments or formal courts, but through the gentle mediation of these respected elders. Imagine their calm voices, their patient listening, as they helped villagers find peaceful resolutions, always emphasizing harmony and the quiet preservation of communal bonds. This quiet arbitration ensured that the rhythm of village life was seldom truly broken by discord. Beyond the daily work, the village was also a place for simple joys and quiet gatherings. Life was not just about toil. It was punctuated by moments of gentle celebration, often tied to the rhythms of the agricultural year or the church calendar. Imagine the quiet excitement leading up to a harvest festival, a time when the entire village would come together to give thanks for the bounty of the earth. There might be simple music from a flute or a drum, gentle dancing in the village green, and a shared feast that, while still humble, was more abundant than everyday meals. You don't need to vividly picture every detail. Simply let the feeling of gentle merriment and shared warmth wash over you. The village green, a central open space, served as a quiet hub for these simple social interactions. It was where children might play their quiet games, where livestock grazed peacefully, and where neighbors would pause for a moment of quiet conversation after returning from the fields. The communal well, too, was a natural gathering point, a place where news was softly exchanged, and where the gentle rhythm of drawing water brought people together daily. Imagine the soft splash of the bucket, the creak of the well rope, and the quiet murmurs of friendly greetings. Evenings, especially during the long, dark winter months, were often spent in communal ways, providing quiet entertainment. Imagine villagers gathering in a larger dwelling, or perhaps the communal hall, if the village had one, around a roaring fire. There would be no bright lights, no loud music, just the gentle flickering of the flames and the soft sounds of storytelling. Old tales would be recounted, stories of local heroes, ancient myths, or perhaps simple anecdotes about everyday life. Some might quietly mend fishing nets or spin wool, their hands busy while their minds drifted with the narrative. This quiet sharing of stories was a powerful way to pass on history, values, and a sense of shared identity, a gentle hum of cultural continuity. You don't need to remember the stories themselves, just the feeling of quiet contentment and shared company. Games were also simple and non-competitive, played not for glory, but for quiet enjoyment. Perhaps a game of dice, or a simple form of chess played with carved wooden pieces. Children might chase each other quietly, or play with simple homemade toys. These were moments of pure, unadulterated enjoyment, free from the burdens of labor, allowing for a gentle unwinding of the mind and spirit. The small size of the medieval village meant that everyone knew everyone else. There was a quiet intimacy, a deep understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses. This close-knit environment provided a profound sense of security. Though life was often hard, there was comfort in knowing that you were part of something larger than yourself, a vital thread in the quiet tapestry of the community. This sense of belonging was a foundational element of their peaceful existence, a deep-seated feeling of being connected and cared for. Even the occasional conflicts that arose within the village were often resolved with a quiet, measured approach. Perhaps the village reeve, a peasant appointed to oversee the community's affairs, would listen patiently to both sides of a disagreement. His role was often to mediate, to find a middle ground that would restore harmony, rather than to impose harsh judgments. Imagine the quiet discussions, the gentle nudging towards compromise, all aimed at preserving the delicate balance of their shared life. The goal was always to smooth over ruffles, to keep the quiet peace of the community intact. This communal existence, this quiet interdependence, shaped the very character of the medieval peasant. They understood the value of cooperation, the strength found in numbers, and the quiet power of mutual respect. Their lives, though seemingly isolated to us today, were in fact deeply connected, a living example of how communities can thrive through simple, gentle bonds. You may already be feeling a deep sense of peaceful calm, imagining yourself as part of this quiet, interconnected world. There's a stillness to it, a profound sense of belonging that transcends time. Among these quiet community ties, the church stood as a gentle beacon, offering comfort and structure. Let's softly explore now the quiet role of faith in their daily lives. Imagine the quiet tolling of a church bell, its soft sound drifting across the fields, calling the villagers to prayer. For the peasants in medieval Europe, the village church was a gentle shepherd, guiding their spiritual lives and offering quiet solace. It was not just a building of stone and wood. It was the very heart of their spiritual world, a place of peace and communal reflection, standing quietly amidst their humble homes. Picture the small, sturdy church building, often the most imposing structure in the village, yet still possessing a humble, inviting presence. Its thick stone walls offered a sense of enduring strength, a quiet refuge from the worries of the world. The roof, often thatched like their own homes, or perhaps covered in simple slate, gently sloped towards the earth. Inside, the air might feel cool and hushed, carrying the faint scent of old stone, beeswax, and perhaps a lingering trace of incense. The light filtering through narrow, sometimes colored glass, windows would cast soft, ethereal patterns on the worn stone floor, creating an atmosphere of quiet reverence. You don't need to remember the architectural details. Simply feel the deep sense of peace and sanctuary this quiet space offered. You may already be drifting off as you picture the soft, muted light within. Faith was not a separate part of life for the medieval peasant. It was woven into every fiber of their existence, as natural and constant as the rising and setting of the sun. From the moment they awoke to the gentle glow of dawn until they drifted off to sleep, their days were subtly marked by a quiet awareness of the divine. Simple prayers were whispered at dawn and dusk, a quiet blessing before meals, and a gentle sign of the cross made before beginning a new task in the fields. These were not grand, loud declarations, but intimate, personal moments of connection, a continuous, quiet conversation with a higher power. The most important rhythm of their spiritual week was Sunday, Massachusetts. Imagine the quiet gathering of the villagers, dressed in their simplest, cleanest attire, as they slowly made their way to the church. The path would be familiar, perhaps a worn track across the village green or through a small lane. There would be no hurried rush, just a gentle, unhurried progression. Inside, they would find their usual places, the women on one side, the men on the other, children quietly settled nearby. The sounds would be hushed, the soft rustle of clothing, a gentle cough, the quiet creak of a wooden bench. The Mass itself, conducted by the village priest, would be spoken in Latin, a language few peasants fully understood. Yet, the rhythm of the liturgy, the familiar chanting of the priest, the quiet responses of the small choir, and the gentle bells marking sacred moments, created a soothing and comforting atmosphere. It was a sensory experience. The warmth of the candles, the soft light, the quiet rising and sitting, the communal feeling of shared faith. You don't need to try and understand the words. Simply let the rhythmic, ancient sounds wash over you, a gentle lullaby from centuries past. This was a time for quiet contemplation, for listening not with the mind, but with the heart, allowing the sacred sounds and gestures to bring a deep sense of peace. Beyond the weekly Mass, the Church's influence extended to the marking of the entire year through the liturgical calendar. This provided another quiet rhythm to their lives, distinct from the agricultural one. There were feast days, marking the lives of saints or significant events in the Christian story. These were often days of gentle celebration, a respite from labor, perhaps accompanied by simple processions, quiet prayers, and a slightly more festive meal than usual. Then there were periods of quiet fasting, such as Lent, where food would be even simpler and minds would turn to more serious, gentle reflection. These cycles provided structure and meaning, a sense of belonging to something larger than their individual village, a timeless pattern of observance that gently guided their lives. Devotion to saints was a common and quiet practice. Peasants believed these holy figures could offer gentle intercession, and protection. Imagine a peasant quietly saying a short prayer to St. George for the health of their livestock, or to St. Francis for the safety of their animals. Simple wooden or stone carvings of saints might be found in homes or by the roadside, small, quiet reminders of heavenly support. These were not figures to be feared, but gentle, compassionate guides, offering a sense of quiet comfort and reassurance in a world that could sometimes feel uncertain. You don't need to remember specific saints. Simply picture the quiet act of faith, the simple trust in benevolent protectors. The sacraments were quiet milestones in their lives, marking gentle transitions from birth to death. Baptism, a quiet welcome into the community of faith, performed with solemn reverence. Marriage, a gentle joining of two lives, blessed in the quiet presence of God and their community. And finally, the last rites, a soft, comforting farewell, preparing the soul for its peaceful journey beyond this world. These were not dramatic events, but sacred, quiet rituals that provided comfort, meaning, and a sense of continuity in the face of life's profound moments. The village priest was a familiar and comforting presence, a gentle guide in their spiritual lives. He was often from a similar humble background, living simply among his flock. He would know each family by name, offering quiet counsel in times of trouble, sharing in their simple joys, and delivering gentle sermons in the vernacular, making the teachings of the church relatable to their daily experiences. Imagine his gentle voice, speaking words of comfort and wisdom, his presence a quiet anchor in the community. He was a shepherd, gently leading his flock through the quiet pastures of faith. The church also provided a quiet moral framework for their lives. Peasants were taught the virtues of humility, patience, charity, and kindness through gentle sermons and stories. They learned the importance of honesty in their dealings with neighbors, the sanctity of their marriage vows, and the duty to care for the vulnerable. These were not abstract concepts, but practical guidelines for living a peaceful, upright life in their village. There was a quiet understanding of right and wrong, shaped by centuries of Christian teaching, providing a calming structure to their interactions. Even in their quiet moments of personal reflection, away from the communal gatherings, faith offered a deep wellspring of peace. Perhaps a peasant might kneel by their bed, or simply sit quietly by the hearth, offering a silent prayer of gratitude for a bountiful harvest, or seeking comfort during a difficult season. The quiet contemplation of God's presence in their world, in the turning of the seasons, in the growth of their crops, and in the love of their family, provided a profound sense of inner peace. You may already be feeling that quiet sense of spiritual calm, a gentle tranquility settling over you. The church building itself often served as a silent witness to generations of peasant lives. Its stone walls had absorbed countless quiet prayers, shared joys, and whispered sorrows. It stood as a permanent fixture in a world where much else was fleeting, a steadfast presence in their quiet landscape. Even the simple artwork within, perhaps a painted wooden crucifix or a faded fresco on the wall, offered a quiet visual narrative of their faith, reminding them of comforting stories and figures. So, for the medieval peasant in medieval Europe, the church was far more than just a place to visit on Sunday. It was a constant companion, a quiet source of guidance, comfort, and community. It structured their time, comforted their souls, and offered a gentle framework for understanding their place in the vast, quiet universe. The gentle tolling of the bell, the rhythmic chants, the quiet presence of the priest. All these elements wove together to create a deep and pervasive sense of spiritual peace that permeated their hidden lives. You don't need to remember every doctrine or every ritual. Just feel the quiet, comforting embrace of their deep and abiding faith. As life quietly unfolded and the comforts of faith provided solace, there were also practical challenges to be met. Let's drift now to the quiet methods of healing and health in their world, exploring how they gently navigated the uncertainties of physical well-being. In a world without bustling hospitals or complex medicines, The medieval peasant in medieval Europe relied on quieter, simpler remedies for health and well-being. Imagine the gentle gathering of herbs, the quiet wisdom passed down through generations for soothing ailments. Their approach to health was deeply intertwined with their connection to nature, a quiet understanding of the healing properties hidden within the earth's embrace. There was an acceptance of life's uncertainties, but also a quiet determination to seek comfort and gentle healing when illness arrived. You don't need to remember every herb or every cure. Simply let the notion of their peaceful resilience settle in your mind. For the peasant, health was often about balance, a harmonious relationship with their environment and their own body. When a sickness quietly manifested, their first recourse was often to the wisdom of a trusted village elder, perhaps an old woman known for her knowledge of healing herbs and traditional remedies. Imagine her calm demeanor, her hands gently sorting through bundles of dried leaves, her voice a soft murmur as she offered advice. These were not doctors in the modern sense, but quiet practitioners of folk medicine, their knowledge gleaned from generations of observation and gentle experimentation. The surrounding forests, fields, and even their own small gardens were their quiet pharmacies. They understood the gentle power of plants. For calming sleep, perhaps a pillow filled with hops or lavender was prepared, its soft scent promising a restful night. For cough, a soothing tea might be brewed from coltsfoot or mallow. Minor cuts and scrapes, a common occurrence from daily labor, would be gently cleaned and dressed with poultices made from crushed plantain leaves, known for their quiet healing properties. Imagine the soft application of such a poultice, the tender care of a mother tending to her child's scraped knee. These were not miracle cures, but gentle aids, offering comfort and promoting the body's natural healing. Fevers, though frightening, were often met with simple, quiet interventions. Perhaps a cooling cloth placed on the forehead or a gentle sweat induced by warming teas made from elderflower. For aches and pains, a soothing balm might be rubbed onto the skin, concocted from animal fats infused with pain-relieving herbs like willow bark, which contains salicylates, a precursor to aspirin, or chamomile. The focus was on providing gentle relief, on supporting the body's own quiet fight against illness. You don't need to feel the pain. Just let the images of gentle care and natural remedies softly envelop you. Beyond herbal remedies, simple practices played a quiet role in their well-being. Rest was paramount, often enforced by the body's own demands during illness. Cleanliness, though not always to our modern standards, was practiced in simple ways. Regular washing of hands and faces, and keeping their humble homes as neat as possible. The fresh, cool water from the village well, drunk daily, contributed to their quiet hydration. The physical labor itself, though arduous, also kept their bodies strong and accustomed to movement, quietly building resilience. Sometimes, more serious ailments or injuries would require the gentle attention of the village bone setter or a local wise woman. These were individuals with a practical understanding of anatomy, able to quietly mend a broken limb or reset a dislocated joint. Imagine the careful, slow manipulation of a limb, the quiet focus of the healer, and the patient endurance of the individual. Pain was a quiet companion in their lives, but so too was the human touch of a caring hand. Superstition also played a quiet, comforting role. Peasants might wear small amulets or charms, believing they offered gentle protection against illness or misfortune. Certain plants, stones, or even quiet rhymes were thought to ward off evil spirits or bring good health. These practices, though not scientifically rooted, provided a psychological comfort, a quiet sense of control in a world where much was beyond their understanding. You don't need to believe in the magic. Simply feel the quiet reassurance these rituals might have brought. Childbirth, a profound and sometimes perilous event, was handled within the quiet confines of the home, usually attended by experienced midwives or older women from the village. Imagine the hushed atmosphere, the gentle encouragement, the quiet anticipation of new life. The newborn would be wrapped in soft cloths, and the mother would be cared for with gentle sustenance and quiet rest. These were intimate, private moments, steeped in tradition and communal support, free from the bright lights and bustle of modern hospitals. Disease, when it swept through a village, was a quiet, relentless force. They did not understand germs or contagion, but they observed patterns. If a sickness appeared to spread, the quiet response might be to keep a greater distance from the afflicted or to move to a quiet, isolated spot for a time. Their knowledge was empirical, based on what they could see and feel, and their reactions were often simple and direct, driven by a quiet instinct for self-preservation. The rhythm of their lives, tied to the land and the seasons, also contributed to their overall well-being. The lack of artificial light meant their sleep patterns were regulated by the sun, leading to a quiet, natural sleep. The fresh air from the fields, the physical activity, and the simple, wholesome diet all fostered a quiet robustness. Stress, while present, was perhaps of a different nature, more immediate, less chronic than much of modern anxiety. Their solutions to life's ailments were direct, rooted in the available natural world and the quiet wisdom of their ancestors. Even in their quiet moments of discomfort, there was often a profound acceptance. Life was understood to be finite, and suffering was a part of the human condition, often viewed through the lens of their deep faith. This wasn't a passive resignation, but a quiet, dignified acceptance, a calmness in the face of what could not be changed. You don't need to fear the illnesses. Just let the quiet strength of their spirit, their peaceful endurance, settle over you. You may already be drifting off as you picture the simple yet profound ways they cared for themselves and each other, a gentle network of quiet support and natural remedies. Their health was a quiet dance with nature's rhythms, a testament to resilience and the enduring power of simple, time-honored practices. As the seasons gently turned, so too did the occasions for quiet celebration and simple enjoyment. Let's softly explore now the gentle pastimes that brought joy to their lives, offering quiet moments of respite amidst their daily toils. Even amidst the quiet routines of work, there were moments of gentle respite and simple joy for the medieval peasant in medieval Europe. Imagine the quiet laughter around a fire, the soft melodies of a simple tune, and the peaceful gatherings that marked special occasions. These were not grand celebrations with dazzling displays, but humble moments of connection, rest, and quiet contentment, woven into the fabric of their daily lives. As the daylight faded and the physical demands of the field subsided, evenings, particularly during the long, dark winter months, often became the setting for shared pleasures. Imagine a small group of villagers gathered in one of the larger, cozier homes, or perhaps a communal hall if their village possessed one. The central hearth fire would cast its warm, dancing glow upon their faces, chasing away the chill and creating an atmosphere of quiet intimacy. There was no need for bright lights. The flickering flames provided enough illumination for their quiet activities. You don't need to feel the cold outside. Simply imagine the gentle warmth embracing them. You may already be drifting off as you picture this comforting scene. One of the most cherished pastimes was storytelling. In a world without books, beyond the church's scriptures, knowledge and entertainment were passed down through the gentle art of the spoken word. Imagine an elder, perhaps with a soft, knowing smile, beginning a tale of ancient heroes, cunning foxes, or a local legend passed down through generations. The voices would be low, the listeners quiet and attentive, sometimes murmuring soft encouragement. These stories were not just entertainment. They were a way to connect with their past, to understand their world, and to escape, if only for a quiet moment, the realities of their daily toil. The rhythmic cadence of a well-told story, the slow unfolding of a narrative, was a profound source of quiet delight. Sometimes it might be simple riddles, softly posed and thoughtfully answered, bringing a gentle spark of shared amusement. Simple games also provided quiet diversion. Children, naturally, would play with whatever was at hand: sticks, stones, pieces of cloth fashioned into dolls. Their games were often quiet imitations of adult life, tending imaginary fields, mimicking chores, or simply chasing each other in the village lane, their soft laughter echoing gently. For adults, indoor games were often based on strategy or chance, played with simple materials. Perhaps a game of Nine Men's Morris, played by moving small pebbles on a board scratched into the dirt floor or carved into a piece of wood. Or a quiet game of dice, though usually played for small stakes, provided a gentle thrill of anticipation. These were not competitive contests, but shared activities, fostering quiet companionship and a gentle escape from routine. Music and song were also vital components of their simple joys. While they might not have had complex instruments, the human voice was always available. Imagine the soft hum of a lullaby being sung by a mother to her child, a quiet, soothing melody echoing through the humble home. Or perhaps a simple flute, carved from wood, played a gentle tune by the hearth. At communal gatherings, simple folk songs might be sung, their melodies easy to learn and their lyrics often telling tales of the land, love, or the quiet struggles of life. There was a raw, authentic beauty to this music, created for personal and communal enjoyment, not for performance. It was a gentle expression of their inner world, a soft harmony woven into the silence of their lives. Beyond these daily quiet moments, the year was punctuated by various festivals, often tied to the agricultural cycle or the church calendar. These were the highlight of their year, offering a much-needed respite from work and a chance for broader communal celebration. Imagine the gentle excitement building as a festival approached. May Day, for instance, was a celebration of spring's gentle arrival and the renewal of life. Villagers might gather quietly to collect fresh flowers and green branches, decorating their homes and the village with natural beauty. There might be gentle dances around a maypole, ribbons softly swirling in the breeze, a symbol of life's quiet vitality. It was a time for soft smiles, shared warmth, and a collective sigh of relief that winter had passed. The harvest festival, after the arduous work of bringing in the crops, was a time of profound, quiet gratitude. This was perhaps the most significant celebration, marking the successful conclusion of their year-long efforts. Imagine the communal feast, humble but abundant, where bread was plentiful and perhaps a special stew simmered with a rare piece of meat. There would be gentle communal singing, perhaps even a storytelling competition, all done with a quiet sense of accomplishment and togetherness. The heavy bounty of the fields, laid out in barns, offered a deep, quiet comfort. You don't need to remember the precise date of each festival, just the feeling of shared abundance and peaceful joy. Even Christmas, though celebrated differently than today, was a time of quiet reverence and communal warmth. It marked the spiritual end of the year and the beginning of the hopeful cycle of winter. Services in the church would be particularly poignant, and families would gather quietly, perhaps sharing a special meal or exchanging small, handmade gifts. The emphasis was on spiritual reflection and the quiet joy of family, a gentle contrast to the cold outside. These feasts were not lavish affairs in the modern sense. For a peasant, a feast simply meant a day where they had more food than usual, or perhaps food of slightly better quality. Imagine the quiet satisfaction of having extra bread, a bit of cheese, or a shared pot of stew with a few extra vegetables. It was a humble abundance, appreciated with deep, quiet gratitude, consumed in the company of friends and family. There was no overindulgence, just a gentle stretching of their usual resources for a few hours of communal enjoyment. You may already be drifting off as you picture this simple satisfaction. Beyond organized pastimes, the medieval peasant also found quiet joy in the natural world around them. A gentle walk through a sun-dappled forest, the soft rustle of leaves underfoot, the quiet observation of birds or small animals. These were moments of simple connection, a quiet appreciation for the beauty of their familiar landscape. The changing seasons themselves brought their own aesthetic pleasures, the vibrant green of spring, the golden hues of summer, the rich colors of autumn, and the quiet, pristine blanket of winter snow. Their lives were intimately connected to these shifts, finding beauty and peace in nature's constant, gentle transformation. For some, perhaps a short, local pilgrimage to a nearby shrine or holy site offered a quiet journey and a change of scenery. These were not grand crusades, but simple devotional walks, often undertaken with a small group of neighbors. Imagine the slow, rhythmic pace of their footsteps, the quiet conversations along the path, and the sense of spiritual purpose guiding their way. It was a blend of faith and social outing, a gentle escape that refreshed both body and soul, before they quietly returned to their village and their familiar routines. In essence, the simple joys of medieval peasant life were rooted in community, tradition, and a deep appreciation for the modest gifts of their world. They found contentment not in material wealth or fleeting excitement, but in the quiet warmth of human connection, the rhythm of shared rituals, and the peaceful beauty of their everyday existence. Their entertainment was gentle, their celebrations heartfelt, creating pockets of serene happiness in their otherwise demanding lives. As these quiet moments of celebration and connection brought joy, the peasant's life was also shaped by duties to those above them. Let's drift now to the gentle balance of their relationship with the lord of the manor, a bond that quietly defined much of their existence. As these quiet moments of celebration and connection brought joy, the peasant's life was also shaped by duties to those above them. Let's drift now to the gentle balance of their relationship with the lord of the manor, a bond that quietly defined much of their existence in medieval Europe. This was a profound, enduring relationship, built upon centuries of tradition and necessity, providing a framework of order and protection in their otherwise simple world. You don't need to feel any sense of burden or unfairness. Simply observe the quiet, steady flow of this ancient arrangement. You may already be drifting off as you consider this long-standing connection. Imagine the manor as a small, self-contained world, a quiet ecosystem where every part played its role. At its heart was the lord's manor house or modest castle, often a more substantial dwelling than the peasants' homes, yet still a part of the same landscape. It was from here that the lord, or his appointed steward, gently oversaw the rhythms of the land and the lives of those who worked it. This system, known as feudalism, created a stable, predictable environment, a quiet promise of order in uncertain times. The lord's primary role, in return for the peasants' labor and loyalty, was to offer protection. Imagine the peace of mind knowing that when raiders or hostile forces threatened, the lord's modest castle or fortified manor house offered a place of quiet refuge. His small band of armed retainers, perhaps just a handful of knights or armed men, provided a visible, if quiet, deterrent. This protection extended beyond physical safety. The Lord also provided a framework of local justice and order. This quiet assurance allowed peasants to continue their vital work on the land, free from constant fear. It was a trade-off, a quiet exchange of labor for security, a comforting arrangement in a world that could sometimes feel chaotic. In return for this protection and the right to live and farm on the Lord's land, the peasants owed various gentle duties and services. These obligations were not arbitrary impositions, but deeply ingrained customs, understood and accepted by both sides. You don't need to remember every specific due. Just let the quiet rhythm of their service unfold in your mind. One of the most significant duties was corvée labor, or working on the Lord's own land, known as the domain. Imagine the peasants spending perhaps 2 or 3 days each week working these fields. The work was familiar to them: plowing, sowing, weeding, harvesting, the very same tasks they performed on their own strips. The sounds would be similar: the steady clop of the oxen, the gentle swish of scythes in unison, the quiet murmurs of shared effort. This was not hurried, forced labor, but a steady, rhythmic contribution, often performed alongside their neighbors, fostering a quiet camaraderie even as they served their Lord. It was simply part of the predictable flow of their week, a customary expectation met with quiet diligence. Beyond labor, peasants often paid rents in kind, a gentle exchange of the fruits of their toil. Imagine them bringing a small portion of their precious harvest, a few bushels of grain, a dozen eggs, a fat hen, or perhaps some carefully spun flax, to the Lord's storehouse. This was a quiet, tangible acknowledgement of their dependence on the land and the Lord. These payments were not seen as punitive, but as a fair share, a quiet contribution to the sustenance of the entire manor, including the Lord who provided the land and protection. The act of presentation itself might be a quiet, dignified procession, a simple offering given with respectful deference. There were also fees for using the Lord's essential services. Imagine the quiet journey to the Lord's mill, the only place where their harvested grain could be ground into flour. The rhythmic clatter of the millstones, the gentle rush of water turning the wheel, the fine mist of flour settling softly in the air. These were the sounds of a necessary service, for which a small portion of the grain would be given to the miller on behalf of the Lord. Similarly, the Lord often maintained the village oven, and for a small fee, peasants could bring their bread dough for baking, ensuring a consistently hot fire. Imagine the quiet warmth emanating from the stone oven, the comforting scent of baking bread, a communal service provided by the Lord's infrastructure. Or perhaps a peasant needed a tool mended at the Lord's forge, with a quiet clink of hammer on anvil created sparks in the darkness, and a small payment would be made for the smith's skill. These were not exploitative charges, but quiet, customary fees for vital services that most peasants could not provide for themselves. Less frequent, but also present, were direct taxes, often called tallage. These were usually collected at specific times of the year, a quiet obligation that, while felt, was an accepted part of their responsibilities. Imagine the peasant counting out a few small coins, or setting aside a specific portion of their produce, a quiet contribution to the Lord's household and the maintenance of the manor's stability. These were not crushing burdens in their daily lives, but rather predictable contributions to the quiet machinery of the manorial system. When disputes arose within the village that couldn't be settled by the elders or the reeve, the manor court provided a quiet forum for justice. Presided over by the Lord or his steward, these courts dealt with local matters, land disputes, petty theft, or minor disagreements between neighbors. Imagine the quiet assembly of villagers, listening as arguments were gently presented and judgments were delivered in a calm, authoritative voice. The goal was often to restore peace and order within the community, to ensure that the quiet rhythms of village life could continue undisturbed. It was a system that, for the most part, operated with a slow, deliberate pace, aimed at quiet resolution rather than dramatic punishment. Serving as a crucial intermediary was the reeve, a peasant himself, chosen by the villagers or appointed by the Lord. Imagine this individual walking quietly between the manor house and the peasant homes, conveying messages, collecting dues, and organizing labor. He was a trusted figure, embodying a quiet blend of authority and understanding, easing communication between the two spheres of their world. His presence helped to maintain the quiet equilibrium of the manor, ensuring that obligations were met and concerns were gently heard. Despite the obvious inequalities, this system provided a profound sense of stability and continuity for centuries. For the peasant, their land was their life, and the manor system, with all its quiet obligations, ensured they had access to that land, along with a degree of protection and order. There was a quiet predictability to their existence, a comfort in knowing their place within the established hierarchy. Generations would live and die on the same patch of land, their lives flowing with the same gentle rhythm as their ancestors. You don't need to consider the broader historical implications. Just feel the deep sense of rootedness and unchanging calm that defined their existence. While often described as tied to the land, serfdom, this attachment was often experienced less as imprisonment and more as a quiet sense of belonging. Peasants knew their village, every path, every field, every face. They had a deep, visceral connection to their specific patch of medieval Europe. Moving away was rare, not just because it was difficult, but because their identity, their community, and their entire way of life were inextricably linked to that one place. It was a rooted existence, a quiet acceptance of their given circumstances that brought its own unique form of peace. There was a quiet respect and deference shown to the Lord. This was not necessarily fear, but an ingrained understanding of social hierarchy, a recognition of his position within the natural order of their world. When the Lord passed, peasants would quietly bow their heads or offer a humble greeting. This was simply the way things were, an accepted truth that allowed for a quiet and generally harmonious coexistence. Indeed, large-scale peasant uprisings were remarkably rare in medieval Europe, especially for centuries. This speaks to a general acceptance of the system, a quiet endurance, and a focus on the immediate realities of their lives. While hardships were common, they were largely seen as challenges to be met with resilience, rather than reasons for radical societal upheaval. The quiet strength of their communities, their deep faith, and their practical acceptance of the world as it was, fostered a peaceful continuity. This quiet bond between the peasant and the manor lord, therefore, was far more than a simple economic transaction. It was a complex, living relationship that shaped daily routines, provided a sense of belonging, and offered a quiet, enduring stability. It allowed for the hidden lives of medieval peasants to unfold with a predictable rhythm, deeply connected to the land, their community, and the gentle hand of their lord. And so, as we gently approach the end of our journey, let us quietly consider the lasting echoes of these hidden lives. Let's take our final, soft steps now towards their quiet legacy and how their seemingly simple existence laid the groundwork for so much that followed. As our quiet journey nears its end, let us gently contemplate the lasting echoes of these hidden lives. The simple, unhurried routines of the medieval peasant in medieval Europe, though seemingly small, laid the quiet groundwork for much that was to come. Their story, often overlooked in the grand tapestries of kings and battles, is in fact the silent, sturdy thread that held the very fabric of society together, a gentle, enduring force that shaped the continent for centuries. You don't need to grasp every historical connection. Just let the profound sense of their quiet importance settle over you. Imagine the countless generations of peasants, their hands calloused by the earth, their faces weathered by sun and wind, their lives entwined with the rhythm of the seasons. Their most direct, and perhaps most profound, legacy lies in their quiet mastery of agriculture. These weren't educated scholars, but living encyclopedias of practical knowledge, accumulated and refined over 1,000 years. They understood the nuances of the soil, which fields needed more rest, which crops thrived in which patches. They perfected the slow, patient art of crop rotation, allowing the earth to rejuvenate itself, ensuring a continuous, if humble, harvest. This quiet innovation, far more subtle than a knight's new armor, was fundamental. It was their quiet dedication to the land that provided the very sustenance for all of medieval Europe. The lord in his castle, the priest in his church, the craftsman in his workshop, and the merchant in his town. Without the quiet, tireless labor of the peasant, the entire edifice of medieval society simply could not have existed. Consider the landscape of medieval Europe itself. Much of what we now perceive as ancient, timeless beauty, the rolling fields, the carefully managed woodlands, the winding hedgerows, the clustered villages with their parish churches, was meticulously shaped by the quiet hand of the peasant. Every furrow they plowed, every stone they cleared, every tree they judiciously felled or nurtured contributed to a vast, living tapestry. They were the original landscape architects, not by grand design, but by persistent, quiet effort, year after year, century after century. The very contours of the land still bear the subtle marks of their ancient strip fields, a gentle testament to their enduring presence. You may already be drifting off, picturing these subtle, human-made undulations across the quiet countryside. Beyond the physical land, their way of life quietly fostered a deep understanding of sustainability. They lived in an era long before concepts of depletion or exploitation were widely understood. Their very survival depended on a gentle stewardship of resources. They recycled everything, wasted little, and lived within the immediate bounds of their environment. The knowledge of which wild plants were edible, which herbs had healing properties, how to read the weather signs, how to preserve food through simple drying or salting. These were not written in books, but quietly carried in their minds and passed down through the generations, a quiet, invaluable inheritance. This deep connection to the natural world, this quiet harmony, is a profound echo that resonates even today. The peasant's life also formed the silent foundation of community and local governance. The village, as we explored, was a self-regulating entity, bound by custom and mutual aid. The quiet discussions at the well, the communal efforts at harvest, the gentle mediation of elders, the simple justice of the manor court. These are the nascent forms of local organization and dispute resolution that, in their simplest forms, prefigured later civic structures. The idea of collective responsibility, of neighbors helping neighbors, of a shared identity tied to a specific place, was born and nurtured in these quiet, rural communities. You don't need to remember the exact village names. Simply feel the deep sense of rootedness and communal spirit that quietly persisted. Their existence fostered a profound sense of resilience and adaptability. Facing the unpredictable whims of weather, the quiet threat of famine, or the occasional outbreak of disease, peasants learned to endure with a stoic, quiet strength. They didn't have the luxury of grand plans or widespread support. Their survival depended on their resourcefulness, their ingenuity, and their unwavering persistence. This quiet fortitude, their capacity to simply carry on, to replant, to rebuild, to hope for a better harvest, is a powerful and often unacknowledged legacy. It speaks to the enduring human spirit, quietly finding ways to survive and even thrive amidst adversity. You may already be feeling that quiet strength, a gentle sense of calm in the face of life's quiet challenges. Culturally and spiritually, the peasant left a rich, though often unwritten, legacy. Their deep and abiding faith was the bedrock of their lives, and through them, Christianity permeated the very soul of medieval Europe. The simple hymns they sang, the folk tales they quietly told by the fire, the local festivals they celebrated, many of these traditions, though adapted and transformed, still echo in our modern holidays and cultural practices. The very concept of the common man, with his quiet dignity and inherent worth, slowly began to take shape within their seemingly unremarkable lives. Their humility, their patience, their unwavering trust in natural and divine cycles. These were virtues quietly embodied and passed down, influencing the moral landscape of the continent. Even the later societal shifts in medieval Europe, such as the slow rise of towns and the gradual weakening of strict feudalism, owed a quiet debt to the peasant. As populations grew, before the quiet devastation of the Black Death, and agricultural techniques slowly improved, a modest surplus of food began to emerge. This surplus, generated by the peasant, was the quiet engine that allowed some people to leave the land and specialize in crafts, to become merchants, to populate the burgeoning towns. The existence of a stable, if humble, food supply was a prerequisite for any other form of economic or social development. Their quiet labor literally fed the growth of new ways of life. The concept of inherited skill and craft, passed from parent to child, often unseen and uncelebrated, also has its roots deeply planted in peasant life. The quiet expertise of the village blacksmith, who knew just how to shape iron for a sturdy plowshare, the silent knowledge of the miller, who understood the grind of the stones and the flow of water, the patient hands of the weaver, transforming raw wool into warm cloth. These were skills perfected over generations. These quiet, practical arts formed the basis for later guilds and trades, contributing to the quiet diversification of the European economy. They were the uncredited innovators, the practical engineers, whose quiet discoveries and adaptations made life incrementally better, year by gentle year. Their very invisibility in much of the grand historical narrative is itself a kind of legacy. It reminds us that history is not just about the powerful and the famous, but also about the vast majority of ordinary people living their quiet lives, performing their daily tasks, and collectively shaping the world in profound, yet subtle ways. Their story is a quiet reminder that the most significant changes can often begin in the most humble of places, through the most unheralded of efforts. You may already be feeling a deep sense of peaceful calm, recognizing the quiet strength in ordinary existence. The peasant's life, lived in intimate communion with the earth, fostered a deep connection to time as well. Not the hurried, measured time of clocks, but the vast, slow, cyclical time of nature. Their days flowed with the sun, their years with the seasons, their lives with the generations. This quiet, unhurried rhythm, so different from our own, allowed for a deeper observation, a greater patience, and a more profound appreciation for the present moment. Their legacy, in this sense, is a quiet invitation to slow down, to breathe, to connect with the timeless patterns that still govern our world. Even in moments of quiet discontent, when conditions became too difficult, the peasant's voice, though often unheard in the halls of power, would sometimes rise. These were not common occurrences, but when they happened, they were usually motivated by a quiet desire for justice, for the restoration of traditional rights, rather than a radical overturning of society. This quiet pursuit of fairness, rooted in a deep understanding of customary law and perceived rights, speaks to an inherent dignity and a moral compass that guided their actions. In essence, the hidden lives of medieval peasants were the fertile ground from which medieval Europe blossomed and evolved. They were the constant, reliable force, working quietly, enduring patiently, and sustaining all other strata of society. Their contributions, though often unsung, laid the fundamental bricks of European civilization. The agricultural base, the foundations of community, the quiet resilience of the human spirit, and the deep, enduring connection to the land and its rhythms. As these final thoughts about their enduring legacy softly fade, allow yourself to simply rest. You don't need to retain every detail or connect every historical dot. Just let the profound, quiet realization of their importance settle gently into your mind, like the evening dew on a quiet field. Their story, a testament to quiet strength and simple existence, now gently concludes. Let us drift now to the quiet rustle of homespun cloth and the gentle comfort of everyday attire. For the medieval peasant in medieval Europe, clothing was not about fashion or display, but about warmth, practicality, and the quiet dignity of honest wear. Imagine garments made from the very earth they tilled, soft against the skin, yet sturdy enough to withstand the quiet demands of their labor. Their wardrobe was simple, functional, and deeply reflective of a life lived in harmony with the natural world and its gentle rhythms. You don't need to recall precise fashion trends. Simply let the image of their unadorned, practical attire bring a sense of quiet contentment. You may already be drifting off as you picture these humble, comforting clothes. The foundation of almost all peasant clothing was wool. Imagine the quiet process, beginning with the sheep, their fleeces gently shorn in the warmer months. This raw wool was then carefully cleaned, the gentle hands of women removing burrs and dirt, preparing it for its transformation. Next came the calming, repetitive act of carding, using two flat brushes to gently disentangle the fibers, aligning them into soft, fluffy rolls. Then the true magic began, spinning. Imagine a woman seated quietly by the hearth or outside her cottage door, the rhythmic hum of her spinning wheel or the silent dance of her drop spindle. The fibers will be slowly drawn out and twisted in a thread, a quiet, continuous motion that filled many an evening or moment of respite. The soft whirring of the wheel, the gentle pull of the fiber, the quiet concentration on the forming thread. These are the sounds and sensations of quiet industry. This woolen thread, strong and warm, was then ready for weaving. Weaving was another quiet, patient art. Imagine the gentle thump-thump of the loom, the shuttle passing back and forth, slowly interweaving the threads into a durable fabric. The colors of this wool were often natural, derived from humble plants or the sheep themselves. Muted browns, soft grays, gentle creams, and perhaps a quiet hint of earthy greens or soft blues from simple dyes made from woad or madder. This natural palette blended seamlessly with the medieval landscape, reflecting the quiet earth from which it came. Wool was prized for its warmth, its breathability, and its remarkable ability to wick away moisture, keeping the wearer comfortable through both chilly dampness and the dry heat of summer. It was a true gift from the quiet sheep. For inner layers, or for warmer weather, linen provided a lighter, smoother alternative. Imagine the tall, slender stalks of flax growing quietly in a field, swaying gently in the breeze. The process of turning flax into linen was more involved, yet equally peaceful. First, the flax was wet, gently soaked in water or spread on dewy grass to allow the outer stalks to soften and rot away, revealing the strong inner fibers. This was a patient waiting game. Then, the dried stalks were broken and scutched, gently beaten and scraped to remove the woody parts, leaving only the soft, pliable fibers. These too were spun into thread, a quieter, finer hum than wool, and then woven into smooth, cool fabric. Linen was used for simple undergarments, soft against the skin, and for lighter tunics in the summer, offering a quiet coolness during the warmest days. The basic garment for both men and women was the tunic or coat. Imagine a simple, loose-fitting garment, cut generously to allow for ease of movement during the demands of daily labor. For men, it might reach to the knee or mid-calf, often belted at the waist to keep it tidy. For women, the tunic was longer, reaching to the ankles, sometimes also belted. The sleeves were generally long, providing protection from sun, wind, and scrapes. The design was wonderfully simple, made from rectangular pieces of cloth with minimal cutting, maximizing the use of precious fabric and minimizing waste. There were no intricate patterns or elaborate embellishments, just the clean, functional lines of garments made for utility. The quiet rustle of these plain garments as someone moved through the fields or sat by the fire was a constant, soothing sound. Beneath these outer tunics, both men and women often wore simple undergarments made of linen. These were essentially loose-fitting shifts or shirts, lighter and easier to wash than the heavier woolen outer layers. They provided an extra layer of warmth in winter and helped to absorb sweat in summer, contributing to a basic level of hygiene. Imagine the soft, smooth feel of the linen against the skin, a quiet comfort worn close to the body. For legwear, men typically wore hose or leggings, essentially tubes of woolen cloth drawn up the leg and often tied to a belt or a simple doublet. These provided warmth and protection for their legs during fieldwork or long walks. Imagine the quiet movement of legs encased in these simple coverings, sturdy and practical. Footwear was equally simple and functional. Most peasants wore shoes made of soft, undyed leather, cut and stitched into basic forms, often resembling modern-day slippers or low boots. These would protect their feet from stones, thorns, and cold earth. In muddy or wet conditions, they might wear simple wooden clogs or sabots, their quiet clunk a familiar sound on cobbled paths or muddy tracks. These were not finely crafted shoes for display, but durable, practical coverings, worn until they could be mended no more, and then quietly replaced. You don't need to feel the mud. Just picture the simple, honest protection these shoes provided. Headwear was also common and highly practical. Men often wore a simple coif, a close-fitting linen cap that tied under the chin, providing warmth, absorbing sweat, and keeping hair tidy. Over this, they might don a woolen hood, often attached to their tunic or a separate cloak, offering protection from rain, sun, or cold winds. Women wore various forms of veils, wimples, or kerchiefs. These were often simple pieces of linen or wool draped over the head, and sometimes around the neck. They served multiple purposes: modesty, protection from the elements during outdoor work, and keeping hair clean and contained during domestic tasks like cooking. Imagine the soft drape of the fabric, framing the face, a quiet symbol of their role and a gentle shield from the sun. For outer protection against the elements, a simple cloak or mantle was essential. These were often large, rectangular pieces of heavy wool, simply draped over the shoulders and fastened with a basic clasp or pin. They provided invaluable warmth in the cold, served as a blanket when resting in the fields, and offered quiet protection from rain and wind. The wool, often undyed, would absorb the earthy sense of their world, becoming a comforting part of their very being. The quiet swish of the cloak as they walked, a soft whisper against the breeze, was a constant companion. Because clothes were so precious and labor-intensive to make, they were worn until they were truly threadbare. Repair and longevity were paramount. Imagine the quiet patience of a woman sitting by the fire in the evening, her fingers deftly stitching a patch onto a worn elbow or reweaving a small tear. Every piece of fabric was valued, every garment carefully maintained to extend its life as long as possible. These acts of mending were not chores, but quiet acts of preservation, ensuring the family remained clothed and warm. You don't need to feel the needles prick, just picture the quiet dedication to making things last. Washing and hygiene for their clothes were simple, yet practiced. Garments were typically washed in a nearby river or stream, or in large wooden tubs, using a basic lye soap made from wood ash and animal fat. Imagine the rhythmic thump of clothes being beaten clean, the soft swish of water, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing dirt gently wash away. Drying would be done in the sun and air, the clothes spread out on the grass or hung over fences, acquiring a fresh, natural scent. While full-body bathing might have been less frequent than in modern times, their outer garments and undergarments were regularly cleaned, contributing to their overall quiet well-being. Finally, adornment was minimal, if present at all. For the peasant, beauty lay in simplicity and utility. Jewelry was practically non-existent, beyond perhaps a functional brooch to fasten a cloak, or a simple, homemade necklace of carved wood or dried berries for a child. A peasant woman's beauty was not in elaborate fashion, but in the quiet strength of her hands, the peaceful expression in her eyes, and the dignified resilience in her bearing. Their appearance reflected their connection to the earth, honest, unpretentious, and quietly beautiful in its natural state. Their adornments were the calluses on their hands, the subtle tan of their skin from working under the sun, and the quiet contentment that often shone from within. So, the gentle garb of the medieval peasant was a testament to their resourcefulness, their practicality, and their deep connection to the land. Each thread, each stitch, each worn patch told a quiet story of their lives, providing comfort, protection, and a sense of belonging in their simple, yet profoundly meaningful world. Their clothing was a quiet extension of their very being, blending them seamlessly with the landscape they cultivated. From the quiet comfort of their simple clothing, we now turn to the subtle ingenuity found in their daily tools. Let's softly explore now the quiet craftsmanship and clever solutions that aided their daily lives, the gentle hum of practicality and design. Imagine the quiet feel of worn wood in a hand, or the subtle glint of aged iron under the sun. The medieval peasant's world in medieval Europe was shaped by simple tools, each crafted with quiet purpose, each an extension of their gentle labor. These were not mass-produced implements from a factory, but often handmade necessities, passed down through families, carrying the quiet history of countless hours of toil. They were designed for durability, for repair, and for the rhythmic, steady work that defined their days. You don't need to visualize complex machinery. Simply let the image of their honest, unadorned tools bring a sense of practical calm. You may already be drifting off as you picture these simple objects. The fundamental principles guiding peasant toolmaking were simplicity, durability, and repairability. Materials were almost exclusively local and natural. Sturdy wood from the surrounding forest for handles, frames, and entire implements. Robust iron, often forged by the village blacksmith for blades and essential working parts. and sometimes stone or even bone for grinding or scraping. There was a quiet ingenuity in their design, a centuries-long evolution of forms that perfectly matched the task at hand, often relying on the brute, yet patient, force of human or animal effort. The craftsmanship was typically unseen, unheralded, a quiet dedication to function and longevity. Let's gently consider the tools that shaped their primary occupation, farming. The most iconic was perhaps the plow. In earlier medieval times, this might have been a simple ard, a wooden tool with a basic share that merely scratched the surface of the earth, pulled by oxen or sometimes even people. Imagine its quiet glide through the topsoil, turning over a shallow furrow. Later, a heavier wheeled plow became more common in some regions, its wooden frame perhaps reinforced with iron, allowing for deeper cultivation. Picture the slow, powerful pull of the oxen, their steady breath misting in the cool morning air, the consistent creak of the wooden frame, and the deeply satisfying sound of the earth being quietly turned over. It was a rhythmic, almost hypnotic process, essential for preparing the fields for new life. Following the plow, the harrow was often used to break up clods of earth and smooth the soil. Imagine a simple wooden frame, studded with pegs or branches, dragged gently across the prepared field. Its sound would be a soft scuffing and rattle as it moved, gradually refining the earth's surface. These were not complex machines, but direct extensions of human effort, designed to make the quiet work of cultivation a little more efficient. For harvesting, two principal tools dominated: the scythe and the sickle. The sickle, a smaller, curved blade with a short handle, was used for careful, precise cutting, often when gathering grain. Imagine the peasant kneeling or bending, their hand gently grasping a bundle of stalks, and the quiet snick of the sickle as it cut through. The scythe, a larger, long-handled blade, was used for mowing larger areas, especially hay for animal feed. Picture the wide, sweeping motion of the peasant, the rhythmic swish-swish of the blade through the tall grass, a continuous, almost musical sound that drifted across the meadows. Sharpening these blades was a quiet ritual in itself, done with a simple whetstone, the soft scrape creating a fine, keen edge. This quiet precision ensured every bit of bounty was gathered. You don't need to feel the repetitive motion. Just let the image of gentle, purposeful action lull you. For cultivating smaller plots and for weeding, the humble hoe and spade were indispensable. Imagine the quiet thump of the hoe head breaking clods, or the gentle scrape of its blade as it cleared weeds. The spade, with its broad blade and sturdy handle, allowed for digging, lifting, and turning earth with quiet efficiency. These were the workhorses of the garden, allowing for careful, quiet tending of individual plants. Once the grain was harvested, it needed to be separated from the chaff. This was often done with a flail. Imagine two wooden sticks connected by a leather thong, swung with rhythmic precision to thwack against the piled grain. The sound would be a steady, quiet thwack, 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 as the valuable kernels were gently knocked free. This was often an indoor winter activity, a persistent, quiet sound within the barn, a testament to the continuous work of providing food. In the peasant home, other simple tools facilitated daily life. For grinding grain, if the Lord's mill wasn't used, or for smaller quantities, a quern was essential. This consisted of two heavy, round stones, one stationary, one turned by hand. Imagine the steady grind as the upper stone rotated, slowly crushing the grain into flour. It was a quiet, laborious task, but one that directly transformed raw materials into the stuff of life. You may already be drifting off as you hear the gentle grinding. For cooking, simple clay pots and, if fortunate, a sturdy iron cauldron hung over the hearth. Imagine the gentle bubbling of pottage within the clay, the soft clink of a wooden spoon stirring its contents, the quiet hiss of steam from the iron pot. Knives, usually simple iron blades with wooden handles, were used for preparing food and countless other tasks. Wooden spoons and bowls were the standard utensils, their quiet clatter a familiar sound during meals. These were tools for sustenance, used with quiet reverence for the nourishment they helped provide. The tools for making cloth, as we discussed in the previous chapter, also played a central role in the home. The drop spindle, a simple stick with a weighted whirl, spun thread with quiet elegance. The larger spinning wheel, with its rhythmic hum and whir, brought a faster, yet still gentle, pace to thread production. The loom, whether a small frame or a larger standing device, was a constant presence, its gentle thump-thump and clack shaping the fibers into cloth. These were not just instruments. They were quiet partners in creation, weaving the very fabric of their lives. For building and repair, their tools were equally fundamental. The axe, sharp and heavy, was used for felling trees and splitting wood, its quiet chop echoing in the forest. Simple saws, usually hand-operated, allowed for cutting planks, their soft rasp a familiar sound. Hammers, often with wooden handles and simple iron heads, were used for driving pegs and making repairs, their quiet tap-tap-tap a sign of gentle maintenance. When building with wattle and daub, simple stakes and weaving tools were used to create the wall structures, a quiet, intricate process. Each tool was designed to work with the natural properties of the materials, guided by instinct and experience. The true ingenuity of the medieval peasant lay not in complex inventions, but in their quiet ability to make do with what they had. A broken tool was not discarded. It was carefully mended, perhaps reforged by the blacksmith, or patched with wood and leather. Parts were repurposed, worn-out implements adapted for new uses. This quiet resourcefulness meant that every tool had a long and useful life, a testament to their frugal wisdom. Their understanding of mechanics, of how leverage worked, of the best angle to cut wood or turn soil, was deeply practical, learned through countless hours of quiet trial and error. The village blacksmith was a pivotal figure in this world of simple tools. Imagine the quiet glow of his forge at dusk, the soft hiss of water as hot iron was cooled, and the rhythmic, yet subdued, clink of his hammer shaping metal. He was the keeper of essential knowledge, able to mend a broken plowshare or forge a new sickle. His work, while physically demanding, was integral to the quiet efficiency of the peasant community, his presence a comforting assurance that vital tools could always be repaired. You don't need to hear the loud clang of a modern smithy. Just imagine the gentle, focused sounds of a medieval forge at work. The omnipresent sounds of their tools were a constant, calming backdrop to peasant life. The soft scratch of a rake, the quiet creak of a wheelbarrow, the gentle rustle of grain being winnowed in the wind. These were the daily melodies of their existence. They were not jarring or intrusive, but rhythmic, repetitive sounds that spoke of productivity, of simple tasks being steadily accomplished, creating a quiet harmony with the natural world around them. So, the tools of the medieval peasant were far more than mere implements. They were quiet extensions of their hands and minds, born of necessity and shaped by generations of practical wisdom. They represented a deep, unspoken understanding of their environment, a testament to their quiet ingenuity, an enduring symbol of their industrious, yet peaceful, daily lives. As the peasant wielded these quiet tools in their familiar fields, their world, though rooted, was not entirely confined to the village. Let's drift now to the gentle journeys and distant echoes that occasionally touched their quiet lives, revealing a subtle connection to the wider world. Though deeply rooted to their land and village, the medieval peasant in medieval Europe was not entirely isolated. Imagine a quiet path winding through the fields, leading to a nearby town or a distant shrine, offering a gentle glimpse of the world beyond the familiar furrow. Their lives, while largely confined to the rhythms of their immediate surroundings, were occasionally touched by the subtle whispers of a wider, more expansive world. These journeys were rarely far and never hurried, but each offered a gentle broadening of their quiet horizons. You don't need to picture bustling roads. Simply let the notion of a peaceful, unhurried journey settle in your mind. You may already be drifting off as you imagine these slow, contemplative travels. For most peasants, The most common form of venturing beyond their immediate village was the journey to the local market or fair. Imagine the quiet excitement building in the household as the appointed day approached. Perhaps a few eggs carefully collected, a small basket of fresh vegetables from a garden, or a piece of cloth painstakingly woven during long winter evenings. These were precious items, carried with care, ready to be exchanged for something the village couldn't produce itself. A sturdy iron tool, a length of finer linen, or a rare spice that carried the faint scent of distant lands. The journey itself to the market town was a gentle affair. Peasants would walk, sometimes for several hours, along narrow, winding paths that meandered through quiet woodlands or across open fields. The only sounds would be the soft crunch of earth underfoot, the distant calls of birds, or the occasional low murmur of conversation if they traveled in a small group. Imagine the rising sun warming their backs, the dew still glistening on the grass, and the fresh, clean air filling their lungs. This was not a race, but a slow, observant trek, allowing time to notice the gentle unfolding of the landscape, the quiet beauty of a wildflower, or the subtle shift in the terrain. You don't need to feel the miles. Simply feel the gentle rhythm of walking, unburdened by haste. Arriving at the market town was a quiet sensory experience, a subtle shift from the deep familiarity of the village. The air would grow slightly more active, filled with the quiet murmur of more voices, the soft lowing of livestock, and the subtle aromas of different goods, freshly baked bread, tanned leather, perhaps even a faint, exotic scent of distant spices. These sounds and smells, while new, were not jarring. They were a gentle kaleidoscope of sensory input, expanding their world in a peaceful way. Peasants would quietly observe the townspeople, their slightly different dress, their more varied goods. There was a quiet curiosity, an unspoken exchange of observations between the rural and the nascent urban worlds. The market itself was a hub of gentle activity. Imagine peasants quietly bartering their goods, their voices low and measured. They might trade a basket of apples for a piece of pottery, or their carefully spun yarn for a new needle. This was not a cutthroat competition, but a quiet negotiation built on custom and a shared understanding of value. It was a chance to see and touch goods from beyond their immediate manor, perhaps a finer piece of cloth from a nearby town, or a tool made by a skilled blacksmith from another region. These were gentle connections to a broader economy, small ripples of commerce extending beyond their familiar fields. After their quiet transactions, they might quietly observe a wandering storyteller or a simple musician, their performances bringing a fleeting moment of quiet diversion before the gentle journey home. Beyond the markets, there were the regular, short journeys within the confines of their own manor. Each peasant would make periodic trips to the Lord's mill, carrying their grain for grinding. Imagine the quiet anticipation of the flour, the steady clatter of the millstones, and the rhythmic rush of water powering the great wheel. The journey to the manor house itself, to deliver rent or services, was another familiar path. These were quiet acknowledgments of their place within the manorial system, unhurried and ingrained in their weekly or seasonal routines. You don't need to remember the specific fees. Simply feel the quiet, predictable nature of these essential errands. Another significant, yet gentle, form of travel was the humble pilgrimage. For the deeply faithful medieval peasant, a journey to a local shrine or a slightly more distant holy site was a profound act of devotion, undertaken with quiet piety and fervent hope. Imagine a small group of villagers, perhaps during a period of agricultural lull or after a good harvest, setting out on foot. They would walk slowly, deliberately, along ancient pilgrim paths, their steps rhythmic and their hearts filled with quiet purpose. Their only companions might be the gentle sounds of their own quiet prayers, the soft crunch of their footsteps, and the murmuring of fellow pilgrims. These were not arduous treks undertaken for adventure, but journeys of the soul, seeking quiet solace, healing, or spiritual merit. They might carry a simple staff, a small bag with bread and cheese, and a water flask. Nights would be spent in quiet contemplation, perhaps sheltered in a simple hermitage or in the kindness of a sympathetic villager along the way. Upon reaching the shrine, imagine the quiet reverence with which they would approach the sacred relics, offer a whispered prayer, or light a simple candle. The atmosphere would be one of hushed awe and deep personal faith. These pilgrimages, though physically demanding, offered a profound spiritual rejuvenation, a quiet connection to a larger spiritual world that transcended the boundaries of their village. You may already be feeling that quiet sense of spiritual purpose, a deep peace settling over you. While rare, some peasants might experience a slightly more significant journey if there was a major relocation of a village, perhaps due to a lord's decision to consolidate land, or in the wake of a great disaster like a flood or a sustained famine. These are moments of quiet upheaval, where entire communities might pack their meager belongings onto carts and slowly, quietly, make their way to a new, designated area. Imagine the silent procession, the hesitant footsteps, the shared uncertainty, yet also the quiet resilience of a community facing change together. Such movements were not chosen lightly, but accepted with a quiet determination to rebuild their lives and their connection to new soil. The whispers of the wider world would also occasionally reach the village, though often filtered and distorted. Traveling merchants, with their horse-drawn carts laden with goods from afar, would bring not only exotic items like spices or finer cloth, but also news and tales from distant towns and regions. Imagine them quietly unburdening their carts in the village square, their stories drawing a small, curious crowd. The peasants would listen with quiet fascination, their eyes wide as they heard of great cities, powerful rulers, or strange customs from lands they would never see. Wandering friars or mendicant monks, on their quiet journeys between monasteries and communities, also served as conduits of information. Imagine a friar, with his humble robes and gentle demeanor, stopping in the village to offer a sermon, and afterward quietly sharing news he had gathered from other villages or even distant cities. His stories might be of great events, or simply the quiet news of harvests elsewhere, but all contributed to a subtle awareness that their world, though focused on the furrow, was connected to a much larger tapestry. Even the occasional soldier or returning crusader, passing through on their quiet way home, would bring echoes of conflict or grand ventures. Their presence would be noted with quiet observation, their tales listened to with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. The peasant might hear of distant battles or holy lands, concepts far removed from their daily reality, yet intriguing in their foreignness. These encounters, while infrequent, provided subtle glimpses into a world of grander scale, a quiet reminder of forces beyond their control, yet also a validation that their quiet lives supported these larger structures. The peasants' perception of the world beyond their village was, for the most part, of very local understanding, perhaps tinged with elements of myth and folklore. Distant cities were often just names, places of wonder and perhaps a little fear. Foreign lands were almost mythical, described in exaggerated terms, populated by strange people or fantastical creatures in their quiet imaginations. Maps, if they ever saw one, would be simple, symbolic representations, not precise geographical tools. Their world was defined by the familiar horizon, the nearest market town, and perhaps the boundaries of their lord's manor. Everything beyond that was a quiet mystery, to be imagined rather than directly experienced. You don't need to remember specific geographical details. Simply embrace the quiet charm of a world known only through personal experience and whispered tales. When a truly rare outsider, someone not from a neighboring village or the immediate region, arrived, their presence would be met with quiet curiosity and careful observation. Imagine a merchant from a truly distant city, his clothes perhaps finer, his speech perhaps subtly different. Villagers would quietly watch him, their eyes taking in every detail. There would be a gentle sense of wonder, perhaps a touch of apprehension, but mostly a quiet fascination with this glimpse of the unknown. They might offer him a simple meal, a quiet gesture of hospitality, exchanging polite words, and perhaps learning a few new things about the vast, mysterious world beyond their fields. These encounters, though fleeting, were memorable, leaving quiet impressions on their minds. And always, after these gentle excursions to market or these slow, spiritual journeys, there was the profound comfort of the journey home. As the peasant walked back, the familiar shapes of their village would gradually emerge on the horizon. The quiet cluster of thatched roofs, the sturdy outline of the church tower, the comforting sight of smoke rising from their own hearth, the subtle change in the air, the familiar scent of their own fields, the distant bark of their own dog. These were the quiet signals that they were returning to their safe, predictable haven. The sounds of the village, once again, would become distinct and comforting. The lowing of their own cow, the quiet chatter of their neighbors, the welcoming voice of a family member. Stepping back into their humble dwelling, feeling the familiar packed earth floor beneath their feet, sensing the quiet warmth of their hearth, was a profound moment of peace. It was a reaffirmation of belonging, a quiet understanding that no matter what wonders or worries the wider world held, their true place, their deepest comfort, was found within the quiet embrace of their own home and community. You may already be feeling that deep, quiet sense of returning home, a profound peace settling into your very being. So, while the medieval peasant rarely traveled far, their lives were not entirely confined. Their gentle journeys to market and shrine, and the distant echoes brought by passing strangers, served as quiet reminders that their seemingly small world was, in fact, part of a larger, interconnected tapestry of medieval Europe. Their understanding of this broader world was subtle, but existed, providing quiet moments of wonder, faith, and perhaps a deep, unspoken appreciation for the stable, familiar comfort of their own hidden lives. Their legacy, in this sense, is a quiet testament to how even the most local existence can be touched and shaped by the gentle currents of a wider world. And so, our story softly concludes, leaving us with a gentle sense of wonder at the quiet power of ordinary lives. As these final thoughts drift away, allow yourself to simply rest. And so, our quiet journey through the hidden, yet deeply rich, lives of medieval peasants softly comes to a close. We have explored their gentle beginnings, their quiet strength in managing households, their vital contributions to labor and trade, their deep faith, and their quiet influence on their communities. We've witnessed their profound connection to the earth, their simple sustenance, their gentle garb, their ingenious tools, and even their quiet glimpses of a world beyond the furrow. You've listened to the peaceful unfolding of history, not to remember every detail, but to simply let the soothing rhythm of the story guide you into a deeper state of relaxation. As the last lingering thoughts of these distant lives softly fade, allow your mind to fully unwind. Feel the comfort of your bed beneath you, the gentle rise and fall of your breath. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to think about, just peace and quiet. May your sleep be deep, undisturbed, and filled with gentle dreams. Thank you for joining this quiet exploration of history. Until next time, sleep peacefully and rest deeply. And so, our quiet journey through the hidden, yet deeply rich, lives of medieval peasants softly comes to a close. We have explored the gentle rhythms of their days, the quiet comfort of their homes, and the subtle strength of their communities. We've witnessed their profound connection to the earth, their simple sustenance, their deep faith, and the enduring bonds that sustain them. You've listened to the peaceful unfolding of history, not to remember every detail, but to simply let the soothing rhythm of the story guide you into a deeper state of relaxation. As the last lingering thoughts of these distant lives softly fade, allow your mind to fully unwind. Feel the comfort of your bed beneath you, the gentle rise and fall of your breath. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to think about, just peace and quiet. May your sleep be deep, undisturbed, and filled with gentle dreams. Thank you for joining this quiet exploration of history. Until next time, sleep peacefully and rest deeply.